I know that you think you could run your favourite cricket team better than those who do, but no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Cricket is about partnerships, and this show was made in partnership with HCLTech. Yeah, the company you see on the Australian shirts. Supercharge your technology with them today. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard, the last non-match day scoreboard. So tomorrow will be the last scoreboard. I've actually seen there's a couple of comments already from people, talking about, I think, All Things Cinema said, thanks for the everyday content during the World Cup. Niche work, really. Going to miss Scoreboard as much as the cricket. Well, thank you very much. We are adding podcasts now. We've had such a successful run during this World Cup, and things have upscaled quite a bit, that there will certainly be other podcasts. There's already one that I planned. So the idea in the future is to have a show every day. It won't be the scoreboard, of course, but it will be something different. But Scoreboard will probably be back, I would say, for India, South Africa. Does that sound right? I think that's the next one. Me and Muku need to make a proper calendar and have a look at the FTP and all that sort of stuff. Neither of us have really done yet. But yeah, that is the plan going forward, to keep these lives going. And obviously, Bayram's already on them, and Estelle's now on them as well. And there will be more and more people that we will be bringing on. So huge thanks to everyone for supporting this channel. In fact, by supporting this channel, you've allowed us to make more of these in the future. So your support has certainly means that you'll get more of the thing that you like, which I suppose is how life is supposed to work. Kind of the opposite of how politics works, I think. Anyway, Keshav said, could Australia drop Marnus to bring in Stoinis Green for an extra bowling option? Marnus at 5 doesn't seem like the right fit. I mean, yes, they should drop Marnus. I feel like I've been saying that all tournament. I in my video, you'll see where I talked about how Australia could beat India. I mentioned Stoinis. Someone got really upset. He's not even in the team. We don't know who the team is yet. But the point was, of course, that Marsh, Stoinis, or Green could bowl those bouncer overs between 15 and 20 when the ball's still hard. The problem with Smith, Marnus, and Inglis is they're very similar players, right? And, if you compare that to India, of having different players with different skill sets who can do different roles, it makes a lot more sense. And if you look at Marnus compared to KL Rahul, or Marnus compared to Ben Stokes back in 2019, those sorts of players, they have the ability to play the Marnus role and, the power role when it is needed. Probably not what Marnus has. Also, I don't think he's a brilliant strike rotator, which you really have to be if you're going to bat at, well, really anywhere in one-day cricket these days. But certainly at 5, I think you can't be in a situation where you end up being 20 off 30. It just, unless the match, unless you're in a situation where your team's 8 for or something, or the ball's zipping around everywhere. But in a normal situation, whereas Marnus does kind of fall into those patterns really comfortably. He's a player who thinks about keeping his wicket intact above all else. Stoinis or Green will probably bat further down the order in that kind of situation. Either Maxwell or Inglis can bat at number 5. I probably prefer Maxwell to be at 6 in the order, but then come in from the 32 over mark if that is the case. Let him smack the spinners around, and by the time he faces the pace bowlers, you're hoping he's already well and truly set. Stoinis probably is the number 7 then, which means Inglis goes up the order a little bit, which I think is better for Inglis as well. And then Green, you can be a little bit more flexible with Green, depending on how you want the setup to go. I just think all of those are better options, right? Stoinis and Green both have bowling, and against India, you might need to, use your bowlers, or your part-time bowlers a little bit more. You might need to take some gambles. So yeah, I would probably go with that. All Things Cinema podcast. How have you seen Cummins the captain in this tournament, especially compared to Rohit? Well, here's a really good example of why a question like that can't be answered. If Cummins was captaining with the Indian attack, he would look absolutely brilliant, and you wouldn't even be asking that question. The reason you're asking that question is because outside of Hazelwood, Zampa taking wickets, and what's his name? The other one? Maxwell being defensive occasionally, they don't have a full 5 bowlers. Stark and Cummins have both been quite poor in this tournament so far. And so, of course, it looks worse. On top of that, you have the situation where they are going to be using more part-timers, through design as much as anything. India would have used more 6 bowlers more often if Shardul and Hardik were in the side. So, instantly it's like, oh, Rohit looks like a great captain because every time he gives the ball to Mohammad Shami, he takes 100 wickets, right? I don't think it's a really fair comparison. And it goes back to my old one of the late 90s when Heath was seen as not a particularly good captain and Steve Waugh was seen as a genius captain. Had you changed the bowling attacks that both of those people were dealing with, it would be very interesting to see who was the better captain out of that. Cummins is like a lot of bowling captains, he's a defensive captain. No one ever likes defensive captains. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure defensive captains are any better or worse than attacking captains, but everyone likes attacking captains. Everyone hates defensive captains. So instantly he's going to get bad rep for that. Secondly, he's got that Kane Williamson sort of thing of, no, we're going to back our players. We'll dig ourselves out of this hole. So look at what Kane Williamson did in the semi-final against India. He took Southee off. And if that's me, who's an attacking captain, I'm like, okay, so I now need to work out what I'm going to do with Southee later on, because he actually takes him off for about 2.5, not 2.5, but 3 overs, I would assume, and then brings him back on at the other end. Because he's like, it's my man. He'll dig me back out of this. That's fine, right? And all he's really doing is changing ends and giving Southee a slightly different look at it. Whereas another captain would maybe have tried something a little bit, maybe you give Daryl Mitchell an over, or you try Lockie earlier, or whatever that may be. And that, although they did eventually have to use Lockie, and Cummins is more of that kind of a captain, right? Of look at what he did against South Africa, bowled Hazelwood and Stark out as much as possible. They were bowling well, so he kept the ball in their hands. Probably would have made more sense to once they'd done that damage, for Cummins to come on as well while the ball was still moving around, especially ahead of Stark, although Stark got a wicket in that case. Then I probably would have looked at Mitchell Marsh coming on and bowling similar to Hazelwood, so that Hazelwood could bowl and over fewer, but in that same area, same kind of bowling, not the same quality, obviously. But Cummins is not that kind of captain. But we knew that coming into this World Cup. Like, nothing has changed from how he's captained before to how he captains now. Amit says, still not over the Maxi innings. It was for a good knock. Is there anyone else who could have played that innings in that situation with those cramps? Stokes or Pant would be my bet. I suppose we haven't seen Rishabh Pant do it over enough in ODI cricket. I kind of feel the old Rishabh Pant, when he first came into the IPL and was starring, could have played that innings. Stokes. Yeah, I think that's more of a Stokes innings. In some ways, that's more of a Stokes innings than perhaps it is a Maxwell innings. The 100 versus Netherlands is maybe more Maxwell. And Stokes is one of those players who, unlike Maxwell generally, probably prefers to be in a situation where he doesn't have as many options. I've said before, I think sometimes when you have to play this particular shot or this particular shot, he's very good at shutting out all the sort of noise around it. And that's essentially what Maxwell did. That's not something I've seen Maxwell deal with a lot. Also, Stokes is used to batting when he can't move. So that helps. I mean, Butler could have played that innings, if we're being honest. I don't think there's any reason he couldn't have. AB de Villiers is another one. I suppose I would want Hunter Clausen and David Miller on that list, maybe further down. I think that's probably fair. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Andre Russell could probably play that innings, but would he stay in that long? Yeah, so, it's a small... I mean, I did a video a couple of years ago, which really upset some Australian fans, hilariously, as well, where I said that if you look statistically at T20 cricket and ODI cricket, AB de Villiers, Josh Buttler, and Glenn Maxwell are in a group together. And you can certainly argue that AB de Villiers and Josh Buttler are better players. They have the better overall records at that stage. I think they still probably, certainly AB de Villiers would. Butlers might have slipped for recent times. He hasn't played much ODI cricket. But people got really, really angry. And I was like, but there's no other group to put Maxwell in. He doesn't play like any other players. These are the players he plays like. And you can argue that he's not as good as the other two. That's a fair comment. But you can't argue that he plays in a very similar style. So, and by that, I should say, so what I mean is we've had hitters before. We've had fast scorers before. What Maxwell, AB de Villiers, and Buttler managed to do, it's the ability to score very quickly without dot balls. It's a really, really interesting thing. So it's very different to Chris Gale, Andre Russell. Even Corin Pollard can dot the ball up occasionally for someone who plays in his position. Someone like Virat Kohli doesn't have many dot balls. Virat Kohli, Baba Azam, trying to think, there's a couple of others. Ravi Bopara was brilliant at never having a dot ball. Ryan Tenduskartha was another one. They just never got dot balls, but they didn't hit as many boundaries. And certainly they didn't hit as many boundaries over the full course of their innings. They might hit them when they needed them later on. Whereas when it comes to Riley Rousseau also was not far off the Maxwell, de Villiers, Buttler section. But it's a really interesting thing of players who don't face any dot balls, still hit a lot of boundaries, and then end up with really decent averages. We haven't had many of them in limited overs cricket. And Marcel, Shaheen won 2 PSL titles, so do you think he'd be a good captain for T20? I didn't watch the titles he won. It seems like an odd choice to me. Although, let's go back to the weirdest thing. I think I've even got it on my phone somewhere. Why Riaz got the job? I'm going to find this because it's such a fascinating thing he said. And I kind of think I know why he said it, but also it's just nonsense. So he got the job as the chairman of selectors, which is already a backwards move. Once you do that, you're already going in the wrong direction. And he said, the PCB's decision to involve former players in cricketing matters is commendable, and I'm willing to work for the betterment of Pakistan cricket. Now, I read that as that means that the PCB beforehand were not getting former players involved, right? But he's replacing Inzamam al-Haq. It's such a weird statement to put out there. And I know there have been some, what's the best way of putting it? I know there have been, non-crickety people involved in recent times. I don't know if that's a Mickey Arthur thing as well, because Mickey Arthur's on another thing. But in cricket, are we really saying that the problem with Pakistan cricket is they haven't got former players involved enough? Like, what? I don't think there's ever been a cricket selection in the world which hasn't had multiple former players involved. The fact that they finally started to go, well, maybe other people who are not former players should also get involved. And as someone who's been on selection committees as a non-former player, let me tell you what I bring that they don't bring. I watch all the games. I look at all the data. And I really do my research. There are some former players who do bits of that. There is no former player who does all three, right? Doesn't mean that I need to watch more footage than a former player does, because I love watching video clips of cricketers with former players, because their ability to pick stuff out quicker than me makes my job so much easier. I'm always trying to drag a coach or a senior player to sit with me for 10 minutes. Oh, I don't want to watch footage. I know, but in the 10 minutes you sit here, I'll be able to do an hour's work. So just give me 10 minutes. So former players are still really important. And eventually, they will get to that point where they can do all those different skills together. I just don't know enough about Shaheen as a leader. As a bowler, he doesn't strike me instantly as someone who has a great feel for tactical stuff. But he might be an inspirational leader in other ways. He, some of that, when you're a left arm fast bowler who can swing the ball, you don't need to be as tactical as other players. So it doesn't mean it's not going on his head, but he's just like, well, I'll just come in and bowl 88 miles an hour at the top of off stump, but it'll hit the top of leg stump and we'll get a wicket here. Do you know what I mean? So it could be that, but I'm not 100% sure. Sriram says, just watch a recent video regarding Maxi versus Bumrah. I've never heavily weighed 1 versus 1 matchups. They lack context with factors like sample size, varying conditions, and player form. Yes, that's very fair. It's also very fair to say that the majority of times I've seen Maxwell face Bumrah, he hasn't looked as comfortable. So you've got, if you're going to, I wouldn't have put that in if I hadn't also backed it up with an eye test. I think the biggest problem with one-on-one matchups is that in the history of cricket, so I looked at this one year. I'm trying to remember what it was. There's an IPL year when I looked at the most deliveries that one batter had faced from one bowler, and it was David Warner facing Kuldeep Yadav, and it was something like 25. And you can't, so if you're facing 25 balls, and this is the most, so let's say you're facing 18 balls from a dude one year, and then the next year you're facing 15 balls from them, and then the next year you're facing 13. I think it's a fair argument. Of course, some of these players play international cricket against each other. Some of these players play multiple leagues against each other. When it comes to T20 cricket, in Test cricket, you get a lot more because you might face 80 balls in one game. There's also other. There are other, the best way of putting it, there are other ways of looking at it too. So you don't just have to look at, and this works better the more advanced data you have, but there is a way of looking at, all the different analysts look at it differently, but uncomfortable. So your uncomfortable ratio, or your, what do they call it on Cricket Info? The control ratio that you have. Right. So if we were to go to, let's see if I can do this live. Let's see how genius I am here. Right. So if we were to go to those two guys, and we'll do Bumrah. Bumrah as the bowler, and we'll look at Maxi as the batter, because that's literally what we're talking about. And we'll do this in, I think I'm looking at T20 cricket to start with. Forgot what I put it. Yeah, I've got T20 cricket, so we know he has a good record there. But let's not just look at wickets and everything else. Let's look at comfortable versus uncomfortable, or in control versus out of control. Then you start to get a really good idea if the numbers are realistic or not. So in T20 cricket, you're only talking here about, what's that, 74 balls. No, 64 balls. So not a lot of balls. And of those 64 balls, 28 of them, Maxwell has been out of control or uncomfortable. That's a hugely high percentage, right? That is another reason that I brought it up in this particular thing, because that really now tells me that even if he hadn't taken a lot of wickets there, he's not in charge of Bumrah. And if we look in one-day cricket, it's 49 balls that he's been in control of and 20 balls that he's been out of control of. So again, that's a very high percentage of the time he's not actually doing particularly well against Bumrah. So what's that? Maybe 30, 35% of the time, and even more so in T20 cricket. Now, you're right. It's 50, 70. So what is it? About 130 balls altogether. But of those 130 balls, almost 50 of them in total, he's not been in control of. So you're not just looking at the average, because the average could be, you could be caught out in deep mid-wicket 3 times. You could have already made your runs. You could be in a ridiculous chase, whatever. You're looking at a combination of economy, average, and then also control factor. And then I'm bringing in my own eye test. I've seen Bumrah bowl to Maxwell enough to be able to do that. And I wouldn't have put it in the video otherwise. But I do think this is a really important matchup for this game, because if Australia get in trouble, Maxwell is the person who can obviously get them out of trouble. Or if they get a little bit slow, Maxwell's the person who can get them the bigger total, all these different things. But chances are, in order to do that, he's probably going to have to face Bumrah. And is he a good player of Bumrah? Based on these numbers, I absolutely do not believe that Maxwell enjoys facing Bumrah. And look, no one does, but there are other players who certainly handle him a lot better. I think Bumrah averages in the 30s in a one-day cricket against Australia, for instance, maybe scoring 5.5 and over. So he's been good against Australia, and we've certainly seen some games where he's caused some problems there. But overall, I think there's certainly something to be said for the fact that that combination is a plus combination for that. So when I worked with in the Big Bash was one of the best ones, because there are a lot of players who played a lot of cricket against each other, and I was usually looking at 3 or 4 key indicators, and if they weren't all leaning in the one direction, or they might have been. There was one, I can't remember who it was, but it was someone against a spinner who had quite a low average against a spinner. It was averaging 20 or something. And the overall record suggests the overall record suggested that I think their strike rate against this bowler was like 11 runs and over, but an average of 20. And they weren't particularly uncomfortable against them. So that one is perfect. So I can tell the captain, I was like, this isn't a good matchup, because this guy will probably whack this ball everywhere. But if this guy's making runs, you can bring this bowler on and actually goad the player, the batter, into going, don't you always smash this guy? You know, like leaving some psychological breadcrumbs out there to try and get them to that point so they go a bit nuts. I just thought I'd look this up just so that we all have it. This is the most balls, and this is probably from around 2001, 2002, this database, I think it is. This is the most balls that any batter has faced from one particular bowler in, went back to ODI cricket, didn't I? Yeah, ODI cricket. So we have the top matchup ever is Mahela Jayawardene versus Shahid Afridi, who faced 444 balls. So it's not a lot in ODI cricket. He scored at a strike rate of 73, but an average of 69. There's some interesting ones here, actually. This is a fascinating one, and I can tell you why, because I know another story about this, but I'll get to it in a second. Ponting versus Vittori, strike rate of 65, average of 43, was the second most balls. Jayawardene versus Harbhajan Singh, strike rate of 65, average of 62. Then you got Sangha versus Zahir Khan, strike rate of 78, average of 54. So you can see the best batters usually give respect to the best bowlers. I'm trying to see one where there's a little bit. Dhoni versus Murali is interesting. Had an average of 135, but a strike rate of 84. That's a really good matchup for Dhoni. Trying to see if there's anything else fun here. Rahul Dravid versus Abdul Razak. Not the one I was thinking would be on this list, but that is a strike rate of 82 and an average of 133. Oh, here's a good one. Sachin Tendulkar versus Brett Lee. Strike rate of 66, average of 26. Wow. Also, Elton Chigumbura does not like facing Shakib Al Hassan, if you need that one. But there was one I was finding here. Oh, here it is. This is fascinating, because this is one of the most expensive. Virat Kohli versus Kemar Roach, 103 strike rate, 147 average. But the one I was looking for is just below that. So this is 272 balls. Virender Sehwag versus Kyle Mills, strike rate of 96, average of 56. And why that is interesting is Kyle Mills is considered in New Zealand a genius bowler against Sehwag, but not for dismissing him, but for his ability to actually get Sehwag off strike. So clearly he bowled a lot to him and got a lot of practice early on, but towards the back end of his career, they would say that he would just bowl at the hip of Sehwag, and so would just turn it around to backward square for one every time, making it Sehwag the problem of all the other bowlers. Anyway, it's a fun story. Sitesh says, would this Indian team be in the finals if the World Cup took place in England or Australia? Well, they got the best seam bowlers and the best batters, so they should be. Shreyas Iyer is, I suppose, more interesting there. They do. The seam bowlers do attack the stumps a little bit, maybe too much for Australia. So they would have to change that. But Sehwag, Bumrah certainly can. Shami wouldn't have a problem. It might be slightly tougher for Siraj, but I'd have to have a look at his overall numbers to see if that's a real thing, or I'm just trying to project based on the thoughts of him bowling. They would, Hardik's injury would have hurt them a lot more in both of those situations. They're still I think if it was played on the moon, they'd still be in the best two teams. I think they'd actually, even if it was played on the moon, I think they'd be the best team right at the moment, regardless, because we're not talking about them just being great in India. If you look at their numbers, they've got all-time great batting and all-time great bowling as overall units, plus all-rounders that flex that out even further in both directions if they wanted to. What other team has that? Like you could argue that South Africa had a really, really good batting lineup, but it certainly wasn't at the point of India's. Australia's is like patchy and weird. And Australia's bowlers are certainly not in as good form, and they weren't as. So a lot of people said, "Oh, Mitchell Starc can't bowl in India." It's like, well, he had one of the best seasons ever in the IPL, but he actually had a bad season or bad tournament in the last World Cup. Oh, there's the thumbs. I've got to take that off one day. I'm too busy in this World Cup for that. Kingfisher says, "Will Pat Cummins slower bouncer work against India tomorrow?" I mean, slower bouncer, you'll never know if that's going to work before you've actually seen the pitch. It depends on how it comes off the pitch and everything else. So that's a really conditions-based situation, that one. I will get to paths in a moment. But Naveen says, based on World Cup performances, do you see anyone getting their debut IPL contract? Well, Ratchan Ravindra's getting an IPL contract, right? Which is hilarious because, I mean, I think with him, all of his past numbers you can almost toss out at this point because he's had a development curve that very few players ever have. But his T20 numbers are an average of 16 with the bat, 122 strike rate. Not bad with the ball, actually, which really surprises me, watching him bowl with a white ball. Well, I should say he takes wickets with the ball. He's got an average of 27, but an economy of 7.45, which is quite high for a left-arm spinner. So he's kind of almost bowling like a wrist spinner with those numbers. I mean, absolutely without doubt. Has Gerald Coetzee got a contract? I don't think he does he? So he'll get a contract. So there's two. Who else do we have? Baz Delita will get a contract. I don't think necessarily the way he played in this tournament, and I'm not sure if he'll get one this year. But him and Omazai, was Omazai already on a list? I always get so confused because there's lots of players who are around in the nets and stuff and doing trials and everything else, but I can't remember if Omazai was around. Those are the ones off the top of my head. Am I missing anyone else that is obvious? This is a weird one, but is Logan Van Beek now a sneaky bench player in the IPL? He probably should be, but he's not even a top tier franchise player, right? But his ability to hit and bowl and field kind of makes you think he should be on some of those lists, right? Like there are certainly worse players than him out in the on as the 8th player on the overseas benches, or not as rounded player here. My worry with him is he's a little bit too slow, and his slower ball isn't quite good enough. But he's a really experienced, really confident cricketer. You could throw him up the order. He's certainly a strong 15 to 20 over batting thing. And he's not, again, a bit like Ratchan. I don't think he's had a great T20 career so far. Let me just have a look at his numbers. Averages 26 with the bat. That's actually way higher than I thought. 26 with the ball at 8.5. So you can see he goes for runs. I do think he's slightly better than that at the moment, but he's always been a wicket taker in T20. And then with the bat, he's averaged 13 with a strike rate of 128. I can't go into that a little bit more, but I think he should start to get a little bit more I think he should start to get just a little bit more numbers, into franchises and everything else. I did not realize he was related to Sammy Gullion. Anyway, that's a really weird I suppose everyone in New Zealand cricket is related to another New Zealand cricketer. So maybe I should have been, should be less surprised that is the case. I'll take another break here. I think Path has got a question, and there's a couple more in the chat that I saw coming up as well. But I'll take a quick break, and then I'll come back and finish off in the room. This is the Scoreboard, and I'm Jared Kimber. Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical content. Welcome back. So I'm just trying to find Path's comment. Ah, here it is. All right. And someone has asked me directly. I'll go into all the starred ones. I'll have a look. I won't take any more normal chats from the room just because I won't have time. But I'll certainly take any more super chats if anyone is desperate. Soham says Madashanka will definitely get an IPL contract. He should. Yes, I think that's fair. Having said that, I kind of felt like he was already on that trajectory before this World Cup. But you're right. It should, left arm pace, taking wickets at the top level. I would assume someone will give him a go. Amit says, Mark Nicholas in his recent Cricinfo article says there's only 2 ODI greats, Viv and Vera. I'm assuming he means 2 ODI great batters. Like, it'd be hard to say that Garner and McGrath are not there. Well, there are only 2 greats because there are more than 2 ODI batting greats as well. If you're saying those are the 2 best of all time, yeah, I don't know. For those that don't know, I'm writing a book on the 50 greatest test batters of all time. We haven't got into the one days. I'm sure if we sell any copies of the test one, we'll do that. We'll probably do the one day one anyway, just because me and Cheyenne are really interested in that sort of stuff. I find it hard to think that Sachin Tendulkar is not in that conversation. Just based on the fact that he batted very, very expansively while averaging a very high average over a long period of time. So the thing with Sachin, and we're coming across this with the test book, and Jack Hobbs is another player that is exactly the same. You have to factor in at a certain point the longevity, but not the way that other people, oh, he played forever, he was great. No. What you have to factor in with longevity is that if you have the ability to play for Jimmy S and Dale Stein's a perfect example of this. There is no doubt in my mind that peak Dale Steyn, Dale Steyn over the best 10 years of his career was a better bowler than Jimmy Anderson, and that Dale Steyn never had the wobble ball advantage that Jimmy Anderson did. And Dale Steyn was absolutely incredible, better on flat pitches, better when he traveled, all those sorts of things. However, from whenever Jimmy Anderson becomes a regular to whenever he stops playing, it means that at no stage during that period did England have to look for another frontline seamer. And exactly the same of Sachin Tendulkar, exactly the same of Jack Hobbs. When you play for that long, you actually put yourself into a situation where you are worth a significant jump up from other players. So let's say, I can't even remember what Mike Hussey's batting average was, but let's say Mike Hussey ended up averaging over Sachin Tendulkar. If you just go on averages, that would be a very similar, stupid thing to do, because Mike Hussey had a very short career where he played majority in his peak. Sachin started as a teenager and finished, as a 55-year-old, right? And what that gets you, that was a joke, by the way, before everyone goes, he wasn't actually 55, but he played very long. What that actually means is you stretch out your entire career, and India didn't have to worry about finding another way above average opening batter, number 4, depending on the format, cricketer. On top of that, he was ahead of the curve quite a bit, right? Like, he was an attacking player before that was really a thing. And then as Sanath and Gilchrist and all those guys come out, he continues to attack and change the way that he plays, tries to stay with the times. Eventually he doesn't, and that happens to all players. That you can only reinvent yourself so many times. Whether I am saying that puts him on that Virat Viv Richards level, I don't know. I would have to go through all those numbers and look at the intangibles and look at the different positions that they were played in, the kinds of teams and everything else. But I find it very hard to think that Sachin's not in that conversation. And I think if you just look at batting average and strike rate, it would be a very easy thing to say. But if you want to compare Sachin and Virat, my guess is, and it's not a guess, but my educated hunch is that what Sachin averaged, which is, let's just quickly have a look. Sachin Tendulkar in ODI cricket averaged 45. That would have been probably one of the highest averages for someone who played in the generation that he played in. And a strike rate of 86, again, would have been a plus strike rate. So he would have been above average and above strike rate. Whereas Virat Kohli, thank you to this page that had both of them on it, in ODI cricket averages 58. So that's a way above average. And he's got a strike rate of 93, which I think during his career is about par, right? There's no way that Mark Nicholas would be thinking about all those sorts of things. That's what you have to really start to do, right? And then you also have to think about the fact that, Virat Kohli came into a team that was very, very strong, where he could kind of slip in, didn't matter as much if he failed to begin with and everything else. His career is going to be shorter. It's going to, a much larger percentage of his career will be played in his peak years than Sachin's will, all these sorts of things. I don't think that doesn't mean that Virat isn't a better player than Sachin, but I don't think that you can just look at the average, which is certainly what Mark has probably done here, and compare the two of them. But I'd have to chat to Mark. I haven't read the article, so I don't know. Moonlight Kissed says, why Stoinis is still a regular member of the team, even when underperforming for years with the bat and not that good with the ball. Who's their other option in that position? Moonlight. Who's that other guy who can come in and instantly muscle balls for 4 and 6? Who's the other guy who can bowl and also be, was willing to bowl at the death and able to bowl at the death? Not well, as you pointed out, but well for a sixth bowler. Has the ability to take wickets occasionally with his rubbish short balls and everything else. Occasionally, when the pitch is actually doing something for the seamers, he's quite a handy extra player to have as well. And people said the exact same thing about him in the T20 side. And he did pretty well in the Australia only won the 2021 World Cup because of him. But yeah, he's going to go down as why did he play as much? But I think if you look at Stoinis's record and his skills, he's coming in at number 7. Well, I would actually, let me check that. But I would say he comes in at number 7. His economy is actually surprisingly good in one-day cricket. I don't know how, because it shouldn't be, but it's on the high side, but it's not 6.5 runs and over, which is where I would expect it to be. But he can occasionally burgle you a wicket, especially, as I said, bowling high-risk deliveries, which he's willing to bowl. He's willing to bowl bounces that will get hit for 4 and 6, and he's willing to bowl at the death occasionally when he has to as well. Most all-rounders are not able to do those two things, let alone willing to do those things. And as a batter, I just want to have a look at his numbers here. If we just break it down a little bit more. He averages 32 when batting at number 6 and 34 when batting at number 7. 32 when batting at number 6, I would say, and that's a 94 strike rate, I would say he's slightly under par. All right? Slightly under par. At number 7, he's only played 11 innings here, of course. And I think he made 100 there as well. He's got 300 runs in 11 innings, an average of 34, and a strike rate of 118. That's a well above par, number 7. It's not even close. Also, they're cheating a little bit. I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're cheating a little bit because they have Maxwell, right? So, and occasionally Travis Head and, I suppose even Cameron Green, although he hasn't bowled as much, Mitchell Marsh. And so they're like, we don't actually have an all-rounder, but that's okay because we've got a couple of guys who can do a few different things, and that allows us to get it in. The one thing I would say about Stoinis is I think they've just batted him out of position because he wasn't particularly good at batting first drop. He wasn't particularly good at batting second drop. And they bat him at 5 a lot, and he's been a disaster. If you look at his combined total of batting at number 6 and number 7, it's 31 innings. I think you're looking at an average around 33 and a strike rate better than a run ball. That's a really good number 7, right? Like, that's a fantastic number 7. And so, when they're trying to throw him up the order and play him in those other positions, I don't think he's a strong enough batter. What's his first class numbers like? I don't think someone was asking about the specialists the other day, but in first class cricket, he averages 33. I don't think you can bat him at 3, 4, and 5 in a one-day team, unless he becomes someone like Butler, to do that. So, I think that's a very, very fair. I see what you're saying, but they know they don't have an all-rounder, right? There isn't another player out there that they can get 10 overs out of, right? Or 6 overs out of, with the kind of flexibility his bowling gives them, with the power that his batting gives them. They just don't have that player. So generally, that's what happens. You end up with a player whose overall numbers don't look particularly good, especially when you use them out of position. And I think he probably, especially in one-day cricket, has been used out of position. Rohit says, where can we check matchups? The best way of doing it is just going to, I'm assuming Crick Sheets would allow you to do it, but you'd have to learn coding or contact Andrew Sampson and you can get his database. Costs a couple of £100 a year, I think. I think both of those would be there. Someone has asked for show up. Oh, let's have a look here. Tendulkar. So Tendulkar versus Brett Lee. Tendulkar versus Chaminda Vas. Sorry, might not have faced that much. They might have been before the ball by ball database when some of those numbers are. So, some of these things are incomplete because of that. I'll come back to that while my computer is trying to stream and do everything at once. Paul says, you keep saying cricketers need fat for power, but there was a difference between Cornwall and Dre Russ. Matthews was way fitter than Kohli. Matthews was way fitter. They're the same age. Shaw and Cornwall should get leaner. Okay. So, Path, look at baseballers. Look at the power hitters. Tell me what kind of athletes you think they are. If you're gonna make a comment about this, you need to know the full story. Go and have a look at baseball hitters and then have a look at Rakeem Cornwall. And I think you'll get a better idea of perhaps what you need to do. So there is a difference between Cornwall and Dre Russ. Cornwall can mishit sixes with ease. Dre Russ needs to get the ball closer to the middle of the bat. There is a big difference. Now, you're assuming there that Dre Russ and Cornwall are a similar strength. Cornwall is way stronger. This isn't about fat. It's about strength. Cornwall was so strong that the NFL wanted to trial him, right? They didn't want to trial Andre Russell. So what were they looking at there? It's about the force that Cornwall has available to him and the strength that he has. I don't know about your Matthews and Kohli thing. I don't really understand the point there, what you're trying to make. Shaw and Cornwall should get leaner. I mean, Shaw is not a power hitter, so he should get leaner, but lots of cricketers should change. There are lots of lean cricketers who are thin, but not built for cricket. So who do we focus on? We focus on usually the cricketers who look overweight to us. We don't look at the other cricketers who don't get their body ready. I can tell you, I know of West Indian cricketers who had absolutely great bodies with 8 packs and everything else, and their fitness people were saying to them, they are not fit for cricket, right? There is many different ways of doing this. And when you just go, he's fat, so he's not as good, you have to actually understand the whole thing. Cornwall would be able to replicate what he does more often if he was slimmer. And he did lose like a huge chunk of weight at one stage in his career. But we have a whole history in cricket of players being overweight and still being successful. We have seen that in other sports as well. Like it's not, cricket is not the only sport there, and baseball is the closest sport. And we've certainly seen baseballers There are two different kinds of baseball bodies, right? When it comes to hitters, there's the guys who can field really well and steal bases, those sorts of guys, and then you have the catchers and the sluggers, and they're a completely different kind of physicality. I think every athlete in the world should do everything they can to make sure they are as fit as possible to be as good as possible. But I also understand that most of them are not like that. There are some athletes who I know do more work on their body than others, and those other ones look skinnier. So what's the point there, Path? Right? What do you do at that point? Because I was reading this really interesting article of recent times about how fit people usually become personal trainers, and fit people who become personal trainers quite often very bad personal trainers. And the reason is they're not actually that good at getting fit. A lot of it is just genetics, right? They don't put on fat the same way. Their bodies are completely different to other people. And so they are now trying to help people who have trouble staying fit, right? Who maybe put on extra weight in certain parts of their body. And they don't know how to help these people because it all just comes off them every time they stop eating 2 pizzas a night, right? Shreds off them. They get back to fitness. They can run for further, they're different kinds of athletes and everything else. The point of cricket is there are many different kinds of athletes. And what we have tried to do over the last couple of years is try and turn everyone into the same kind of athlete. And what I am saying in cricket is that Rahkeem Cornwall is a plus athlete in cricket. He's a plus athlete because of his strength. He's a plus athlete because of his height. And he's a plus athlete because of his hand size, right? We are telling him he's not a good athlete because he's not Faf du Plessis and he doesn't have a six-pack, right? Could Cornwall better use his height and strength and everything else? Yes. Do you know who else could? Many tall bowlers fall over at the crease. So watch them. They collapse at the crease and they don't use their full height. And then you have other guys like Jacob Oram and Josh Hazlewood and Akshar Patel who bowl to their full height and actually end up with massively higher releases than other bowlers who are taller than them. No one ever complains about them. Those tall bowlers not using their height correctly. Very rare. Occasionally you get a former bowler who'll moan about it a little bit, right? Very rarely do we talk about that. We talk about fat people because we fat shame all the time, right? Jesse Ryder is a perfect example of someone who was fat shamed all the way through his career, and yet New Zealand would use him at point. Why did they use Jesse Ryder at point? Because his first 2 steps were as quick as anyone in that side, right? He could move around absolutely brilliantly in that position. A point was a really good diver at gully as well in test matches and everything else. So what are we measuring? So that whole 2K time trial and the skin folds test and all this, there are just people who, no matter how much fitness they do, are going to have slightly higher skin folds than other people, right? It is just a fact of life. Did I ever get that thing that Rohit wanted here? Oh, here we go. I did get it. Let me bring him back up so he gets the full glory. Rohit versus Gupta. Rohit versus Gupta, sorry. Who are we talking about? Tendulkar versus Akhtar. We have here 221 deliveries. Tendulkar had a strike rate of 83 and an average of 54. If you compare that to him against Mitchell Johnson, he had a strike rate of 81 and an average of 63. So, probably you would expect that. Should we find a couple of other ones? Some really good matchups. Stephen Finn and Rahane. Rahane absolutely got sussed it up by Stephen Finn. Only averaged 26 against him. Dilshan Harbhajan Singh averaged 22. 237 balls too. That's quite a bit. Rohit Sharma never went out to James Faulkner. I suppose not quite fully frontline player. Graham Smith, Chaminda Vaas. Graham Smith averaged 23 against Chaminda Vaas. And, here's a nice one. Kohli versus Malinga. Average of 121 at more than a run a ball. Kohli versus Southee. Oh, I like this. This is interesting. Scores at well over run a ball against Southee, but Southee gets him out an average of 33. That is quite interesting. Yeah, it's a fun thing. I think I'm pretty sure Tim Wigmore is writing a book, and he's looking at some of the historical ones in Test cricket. But yeah, there's a lot that you wouldn't really expect in one direction or another. Here's one I was absolutely positive I knew. Paul Sterling versus Rashid Khan, an average of 20, a strike rate of 55. Yeah, a lot of the Irish boys. There's a running joke in Irish cricket that they made Rashid Khan just by how bad they played him over the years. I'm just trying to see if there's any other. AB de Villiers only averaged 30 against Syed Ajmal, a strike rate of 88. Dhoni versus Malinga, strike rate of 113, and average of 80. That actually makes sense if you think about the way he bats, by the way. Rahul Dravid versus Shahid Afridi, average of 171, and a strike rate of 83, still scoring off him. Absolutely, that's a wild one. Ponting loved playing Intini, but again, so you can see with some of this, some of it is a pattern, right? So Ponting playing Intini and what was the other one I just said? Dhoni playing Malinga. Both those things make sense. Dhoni doesn't mind the ball being as full as possible because he can power away balls that are quite low and he can hit very straight, right? So that actually suits him the way that Malinga bowls. And exactly the same with Ponting and Intini. Intini's best length is probably going to get pulled by Ponting. So that means Intini's going to have to try something different that he's not as good against. Virat Kohli averaged 198 against Imran Tahir. Ricky Ponting never went out to Jacob Oram. That's less sexy. Whoa! And this isn't throughout the entire history. So this would be from about 2002. Tendulkar, strike rate of 112 against Afridi. So there's a lot of good batters who were striking a lot slower than that and didn't go out from him. So it was the final 189 balls of their career there that you have. And Vittori absolutely tore shreds off Adapadu. Let me just see if there's anything else here. Vikas says, is it feasible to walk 90 steps in 2 minutes and take guard? Well, yes. Most international cricketers do it all the time. How long does it take you to take 90 steps? Yes, it's very feasible. It's been going on for a couple of 100 years. Batters have always managed to be able to do it. So certainly it is feasible and it's something that everyone does. But that's me for today. I'll see you again tomorrow when I believe, everyone, we will have a World Cup final. And so by the next time I see you, we will know who has won this World Cup. And considering the 7,000 hours I have spent broadcasting this World Cup, it would be just incredible to finally get to the end and have something there. But thank you to everyone for supporting me again, for Vikas and Path and Naveen. Was there someone else? I think those were the super chats, but also to everyone else here. And also, especially the many people I didn't get a chance to get to. Dhoni God, I wonder who he likes. Soham, John, and quite a few others. Oh, wait, I've got to get John's. John's is hilarious. Shami is useless. He got exposed against the Netherlands team. He could not buy a wicket against the Netherlands. That is a good way to finish this and prepare us for the World Cup final. I'm Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard. I will be back. I'll be back after the World Cup final. And I don't want you to think that I was just glory hunting, because I was here all along. This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. This show was made by HCLTech, a company that believes in partnership so much you can read their name on the Australian shirt. This show leans in hard on data and technology, so we are proud to work with HCLTech, leaders in their field. Love sports and want to write or podcast on it? Look no further than Fans with Laptops. It's a specialized course tailored for aspiring sports enthusiasts like you. Uncover the secrets of the press box, learn how to create compelling stories from scratch, and discover the best methods to share your content online. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical content. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in, KIMBER, and get 3 months free today.